Welcome in, everybody, to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. This is a jam-packed Thursday night. I was on here about 14 hours ago. Early this morning, I had a long day, and my goal was I was anticipating a lot of different things dropping today. I was told to keep me on the lookout, and I kept telling you in that 20-minute show that I did this morning that I might even try to stop and do some handhelds in my vehicle. But too much stuff started flowing out all together. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to come on here as soon as I can. This is as soon as I've been able to do it and just put it all in at once instead of chopping up several, because that's what the day turned into. And it's been huge news. First, there was a bolt of A-list portal entries. And earlier this morning, I said, pay attention to as we start anticipating up to two more visitors for Arkansas through next weekend. Couple of things. One is, could a Nate Ament situation pop? But we've got an update on that. But also, other names coming into the portal, and that could change things with who you're looking at. I didn't talk about maybe lack of retention. I was talking about that because I was getting some nuggets that some stuff was about to start happening. Okay, so it did, and it was a lot more than I realized it would be today. That was the part of it that's interesting. So the whole purpose of this initially was to come in and talk about all these portal splashes, players going in, and a couple of them, maybe as many as three, that you could connect to Arkansas having some serious interest in, and that interest being mutual. And part of the notion is, where could that go when you know that the roster's not completely filled out? But the other part was Arkansas decided out of the blue via John Calipari in his video tweets. We know he had one a couple of weeks ago, about 2 minutes long, just giving generics, no specifics. Tonight, he says, I met with a team and I have a team. It was kind of a play on last year's theme where I met with a team and we didn't have a team. So he started it out that way. And then you started seeing player images pop up on the screen. And there's something significant in there. We're going to talk about that as well. But then it flowed into specific players talking about, the theme was all in, and you saw DJ Wagner, the first one on there. I'm all in. Then it was Trevor Brazile, a less than enthusiastic looking Trevor Brazile on this video, basically saying, I'm coming back, woo pig. He didn't use the phrase all in. Everyone else did, which is okay. I just noticed that. But there's some other things I noticed that might tell us some things about this next team. Then it was Billy Richmond III. So those are your three retention guys. Where's Carter Knox? Well, was it a half hour, an hour before Carter Knox puts out on his Instagram account a message saying he's declaring for the NBA draft to go through that process, but also maintaining his college eligibility. Quite a different statement than we saw with Boogie Flann and Thurs, who we just assumed once they were going in and going to stay in anyway. No one really thought we would see some kind of verbiage like that, other than Arkansas did make a heavy NIL play on a Thurs. He thought, well, maybe, but when he didn't, that wasn't that big of a surprise. This, technically, because he's in the draft process, it's the same as Boogie Flann and a Thurs in the sense that he's no longer a collegiate player until he withdraws from the draft. So you can't count him in the video, and he would not be in that video announcing guys coming back. Although I've already talked to an NBA scout about his draft prospects since he announced Carter Knox. We're going to go through some of that as well. But so for now, don't worry about him being gone. I think the odds are more likely that he returns, always understanding that all it takes is one team to fall in love with a player, and he's going to have opportunities probably to work out with teams, maybe get invited to the draft combine. And the second half of his freshman season was vastly better than the first half. And it's a large sample size because his last 18 games, Arkansas played a total of 36, were really good statistically in some ways. And we'll go through that too. I'll show you what some of that'll be. But the main story here is right now, as we jump into, again, a little later, we're going to go through some of these portal possibilities that have popped up, and there's some really strong possibilities. But where we thought it was going, Arkansas is going to retain 4. Now it looks like it'll end up still being that 4 with question marks about Carter Knox. And just to throw this in here real quick on Carter, before I break down his numbers and what the scout said, the deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft is May 28th. So he could play this out to the very end. A lot of players do that while they're getting their feedback and maybe getting workout opportunities, things like that. So roughly 6 weeks from now, between 5 and 6 weeks, that's a wait, right? When you're trying to make portal moves. The portal closes officially April 22nd. So these retention announcements are really important because now we don't have to wait till the day that it closes to find just to learn that they never entered it. Now they're telling us they're not going to enter it just a few days out, right? So now we know that. And it's important to note that Carter Knox is not entering the portal. Only that he's going to test the draft process and keep his college eligibility remaining. So your retention is looking good, even though Carter Knox becomes more of a question mark right now because of the pro stuff. But the deadline to get out of that is May 28th to come back to school. The NBA draft combines May 11th through 18th. Let's see if he gets an invite. He's probably going to get workout opportunities with teams, whether he's invited to the draft combine or not. So those are things to keep an eye on. I don't know if he would be eligible for an invite to the G League elite camp that kind of begins before the combine. They kind of coordinate that stuff together, sometimes in the same place or in the same city or near each other, because you can get some invites if you did well in that G League elite camp to the draft combine. So I don't know, him being a freshman, what his eligibility would be for something like that if he doesn't get an invite right away from the combine and not among that group. So those are some things to think about with Carter Knox when you talk about dates, deadlines, things like that. But I'm going to circle back to him later to go through what that might look like. The fact that you've gotten these announcements now from Trevor Brazile, who I've been saying lately has the potential to be an all SEC kind of guy. If that lightning in a bottle the last 9 games, he can consistently play at that level. Not saying he has to be that good every single game, but consistently good at that level. He's got all SEC potential. He was at the point with a Adu Thero out where he's knocking down, he had a 40-minute game in that overtime win against Texas in Bud Walton Arena. Multiple high 30-minute games down the stretch. Some where he got in foul trouble, played 25 to 30 minutes, but had big second halves and still produced. I mean, this guy was really good even when he was dealing with some of those foul trouble issues in some of those games. But you're loving the fact that he's coming back. You're loving the fact that Billy Richmond III's coming back. This guy played his best basketball, was really starting to develop. Remember, he had his first double-digit scoring game late in SEC play. Then he had his career high of 15 points after that, and then he topped that off down against St. John's in Arkansas's last win. Not only a career high 16 points, but that led the team. And scoring's not what he's all about. He's an energy guy. He's a guy that can really help you defensively. He's a downhill, get to the rim kind of guy, can turn a steal into a dunk just like that in transition. So there's a lot to like about Billy Richmond III and his development. And then DJ Wagner's a guy we've always said, you're talking program continuity. You want to bring players back. That's what your Final Four and Elite Eight teams all had, some really good measure of veteran guys that have been in the system. Well, Trevor Brazile's been in the system for one. He's a veteran guy, but he's been in the system for 1 year under Calipari. This will be year 2. Same with Billy Richmond III. Same with Carter Knox, assuming you get him back, and I think you probably will. We're going to go through some of those reasons in a little bit. So DJ Wagner is going to be year 3 under Cal, so he's got even more there. And, he's a 1-2 combo. There's some question marks about how it's going to work with Acuff. DJ played his best basketball on the ball with Boogie out and not even an option. And you don't hope there are any injuries with a guy like Acuff. So then you've got a reality of how are they going to split that up. I think Acuff is an earmarked day 1 starter type of guy. I really believe that. I won't change on that until I find out more later. But I think that's probably the case. That doesn't mean DJ won't be in the starting lineup too, also at the 2. And maybe it's Malik Thomas playing, in a 6-man roller off the bench initially. Because you got to figure Carter Knox will be your starter at the 3, assuming you get him back. Trevor Brazile at the 4 for now. Let's go ahead and pencil that in. We know they just added the 2 big men out of the portal. Big news a few days ago, right? A couple of days ago. It seems like forever now with everything that's happened since. Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle. So one of those guys will be penciled in at your 5. So that's where we're at for now. When we look now at retention, and we've got news on that. Again, Carter Knox, not a given. He's not a part of the retention video because technically now he's off to the NBA until he withdraws. And, so you're not counting that scholarship other than thinking you probably will be again. For now, it's off the table. And do you recruit? That's another question with all these portal splashes today, guys going in, A-list kind of guys. Does this give you more ammo to go ahead and recruit them? Especially when you're hearing today, I'll just say it now, Nate Ament, the 5-star we keep talking about, got a crystal ball. I don't usually talk about those, but this came from Travis Branham, one of the top national recruiting directors in the game, but at 247 Sports, to Tennessee. And we've been saying there's been a lot of momentum for Tennessee, talking about the big offer that the Volunteers had put out for him in NIL. Really, really were going to be aggressive. You remember I was bringing that stuff up weeks ago to keep an eye on that. Well, here we are. And so maybe he's going to Tennessee now. I guess until he makes it public, who knows? Could the wind shift again? Sure, why not? Could someone else get desperate enough to really exceed what Tennessee's offering and change that dynamic and make it one of those things that's a lightning rod for changing that discussion? Sure, it's possible. But more and more now, based on this today, it's looking like Ament's off the table, which helps Arkansas focus even more on the portal. So, Carter Knox and Ament, Ament is a big wing that can maybe be a 3-4 at the college level. Knox, mostly a wing, maybe as he continues to develop, help you at the 2 some, but certainly could be a small ball 3-4. Arkansas was so diminished last year when it got down to a top 7 rotation because of attrition and injuries that he had to play some small ball 4 at times. You don't want to be in that situation again if you don't have to, but it's not to say you can't make that work somehow. But the idea here is that you're not recruiting over Knox at this point, but maybe you've just got to look at players that could slot in some at the 3, even if they do like a 3-4 combo. And we're going to go through some of those names again when we get to that point. But I think it's a big deal now to get this news on this retention. Mentioned Trevor Brazile as a potential all-league kind of guy this upcoming season. Well, I say that I've said the same thing about Carter Knox. I don't rule out for him even a first-team kind of trajectory if things go right in year 2. But certainly second or third team, automatically you're thinking could be something he could do. And so you can't rule out him as an all-league kind of guy. I mentioned Billy Richmond, more in line with maybe an all-defensive team kind of guy, potentially. Couldn't rule that out even for Brazile if he continues to rebound and block shots. If he's not a traditional 1, 2, or third team all-league guy. So your retention was important because of the value these guys brought when they helped you get to where you did to get to a Sweet 16 in just a few play or two, a made free throw away from, punching your ticket to the Elite 8. These guys weren't just role players. They were mainstay guys. They were major players in it. DJ Wagner could potentially be an all-league guy. And when you start talking defense, maybe. Can he, improve in enough areas where he could make an all-league team, period? Maybe. I mean, he's got to, I think there's room for improvement for him taking care of the basketball. It's something I always say, improving his 3-point shot. But at the end of the day, he's one of the best slasher driver lead guards in the country, getting it downhill and having a variety of finish on the left side of the basket and the right side. He's in a nice little floater game. He was a big second half guy in some of Arkansas's biggest wins. So that's another thing, maybe level it out more and maybe be more effective in both halves and bigger opportunities. You can nitpick, but for a guy that's going to be in his 3rd season of college basketball, you're glad to have him back. That bond with Calipari and his family and him goes beyond just when they started recruiting him seriously as a player ready to make the step from the high school to college level. I've always talked about that. There's something to be said for your program continuity and those kind of connections and ties, the loyalty that goes into it. That all only helps your chemistry. That only helps build your team beyond just what are the sum of the greatest parts you could assemble. And, because some of these portal names that came out today, we could look at them and set, for example, a guy like PJ Haggerty, who's entered the portal out of Memphis, beside DJ, and look at their resumes and go, well, this is a second-team All-American, 21 points per game. This is no-brainer. But if you like the pieces you had that helped you get to a Sweet 16, nearly an Elite 8, and you can fill around that, not everybody's going to be the 20-point per game score. That won't work. You need guys like a DJ that's going to regularly give you 10 to 12, do other things, and maybe brings other elements, toughness, physicality in that backcourt. Maybe, I'm just saying this makes sense to me. And it doesn't mean that you still can't add some guys where we don't necessarily right now see how that works. And maybe there's a plan for where it will. But I think, again, this is huge news on the retention. I feel good about where things will end up with Carter Knox. And so before we get to him, there were some things in the video that I liked. Calipari, again, introducing all the players that are in on this. We didn't see anything in the video from Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle in terms of I'm all in. Well, why would they be in that video? They just signed. They're signed. They didn't just commit. We told you a while back. They not only signed, their paperwork was all done. Their enrollment, their admissions, the fact that, people are talking about, oh, they actually signed already. Yeah, we told you that. They've been signed for, going back to early April. That's over. So they weren't in the video when you start talking about announcements. They didn't need to be. They did have Darius Acuff Jr., Malik Thomas, Isaiah Seeley, and Kareem Artal speak and say we're all in. And I think that's important too. Why? Because even though they signed, some of those guys signed much later, back in the early period. And so as you retain guys and you know that there's portal activity going on, there may be some thought that, are we sure that these guys are still solid? Are we sure they're going to show up and come to campus here at the end of May or whatever it is in May to be here in time for summer session 1? Are they being spooked by anything? Were any of those guards thinking DJ was going to leave? Now, this helps that message to solidify the fact guys are coming back. And what they did was, I mentioned it, they put pop-ups on the screen with photos around Calipari before they went into the video part. And it's interesting, the pop-ups, because here's what was on there. It was all those guys, the 3 retention. Well, Carter Knox not in there right now. He's in the draft. He's not part of the retention conversation officially right now. At some point he will. So the other 3 plus those 4 signees, that's 7. But those were the video parts. But in the photos, you had those 7, but you also had photos of Ewan and Pringle because they're part of the roster now. They didn't have to say anything about we're all in. We know that. They just got their stuff done within the last 48 hours. But they were among the photos. As was, obviously, the 4 guys that have been signed recently. I just went through their names. And the other photo that popped up at the very top right, above everybody else, was Jaden Carroll-Letwa. He was one of those others, other 4 or 5 outside the top 9 that was a practice body. That was, basically a walk-on, technically on scholarship, but basically a walk-on out of California, 6'6" guy, but he was in there. But he didn't speak. He didn't make an announcement, I'm coming back. And so what I find interesting about this is, number one, because he's in the photo, he's coming back, right? It wouldn't have included him if he wasn't. And that tells you that's just another body for practice. That's another guy that's staying in your program. All right, fine. But the fact that Seeley and Artal are speaking in the video tells me, what have we been talking about? Go back, not this morning, but yesterday, my Wednesday afternoon, we spent a lot of time on drilling down on, now you've added the 2 big men and you're trying to keep 4. And you've got those 4 signees, 2 of those signees. What are their projected roles going to be? Are they back end of an expanded rotation and they're going to be there with an opportunity to help as needed? Or are they just off the table and they're just a better quality of the guys that'll never really see the floor unless it's a blowout once or twice here and there, and they're really not factoring in to if you needed help? We were kind of all over the map of that. And one of the points I made during that was, but these guys, their resumes, what they've done, who they are, they're even from a size standpoint and versatility standpoint with Artal, that plus his age, 20-year-old freshman coming in, they have a much better chance just based on that to actually be able to help Arkansas if called upon. And I think the fact that they got speaking roles and not just photos is part of maybe helping tell that story, that even if they're not your 10th and 11th guy, maybe there's still a way that they'll be viewed as players that can help while you're developing them in a pinch. If there is more attrition that you counted on, or you have a combination of attrition and heavy foul trouble in a game, and you just got to get so I thought that part was just a little bit telling. I might be reading too much into it. I don't think so. I think there may be something there. And so let's just jump now to Carter Knox. I'm going to go back to that before I wrap up what Calipari wrapped the video with, what he said. And then we go into some of these portal splashes today. Guys getting in, man, it was a spoil of riches. By the way, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson, 20 minutes in. Appreciate you being here. So Carter Knox, into the draft, maintaining college eligibility, testing the waters. He put a statement out, and it was, said that was thanking teammates and fans, and he, all the positive stuff. But he, this past season, 8.3 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 1 assist. He ended up 46.2% shooting from the field. He ended up making 35 of 100, exactly 100 attempts from three. And that was good for 35% shooting from distance. Okay. So that's impressive, right? I mean, it's good. That's freshman. Where he started, it was so bad that you're impressed that he got there. So what did he do in the last 18 games? He had a 36-game season. You went 22-14. That's 36 games. 18 of those is exactly half. The final 18 games, Carter was averaging 10.4 points per game in the final 18, almost 54% overall shooting from the field, 53.8. So for 18 games, straight games to finish the season, 45.5% shooting from three. That's really strong. And he maintained his 80% free throw shooting. That's what he finished on the whole season, and that's what he was in that 18-game stretch. So he was consistent there, but he raised up. And what do we always say about him? Making better decisions about shot selection, understanding how to use that solid frame and that strength, all that bulk. At 6'6", strong guy, got better defensively, understood how to get downhill and get to the rim or draw free throw attempts. He got better and better at that stuff, and he knocked him down at a really good percentage. Now, he's not, when you look at him as a freshman, even though he started shooting better from three and his volume as a result got to go up, he went, 4 for 4 at Arkansas's loss to Texas Tech, right? He had some games but he really wasn't, when you look at him, he's kind of towing the line. That's fine for college. He's towing that college line. That's fine. You just want him to be efficient. But it's a different story when NBA folks are evaluating that. It's not necessarily jumping off the page, even looking at those last 18 games, that he's going to be able to provide that anytime soon. And so you're thinking about stuff like that. What did he really tell the league about what they're looking for shooters at their level? Quick catch and shoot. Having some craft and setting up that 3-point shot game. So Carter made a lot of strides there. I don't know how much that checked boxes. Now, as soon as this news came out and before the video came out of the retention stuff, a little bit later, right in between there, because it happened bang, bang, I went ahead and reached out to an NBA scout. And he said, really, he goes, I believe this ends up being about the feedback and the process to figuring out what it's going to take to go back to school and make myself a first-round draft pick. And then he gave the disclaimer, all it takes is one GM, one situation to fall in love, see you in a workout, see you at the combine, look at your tape, and now all of a sudden you're getting some kind of guarantee. And don't ever forget, some things that are enticing for some players is not just that appearance of the first round, but you can get some really good guaranteed contracts in the second round, but with fewer restraints in terms of getting to your next contract. So the money may be close, but a little bit off from the first round. Some of the first round stuff locks you in a little bit longer to guaranteed money, where if you don't perform necessarily well, you're going to get that money. There's maybe some more flexibility with stuff and not as much, of security. You bet on yourself with second round stuff. But that's why NIL is so important, because Arkansas, their budget, Matt Norlander's been putting out the other day, it was 8 programs that, have $10 million budgets. And I kind of giggled, and I was going to tweet out Arkansas among them, but I'm sitting there thinking, actually, Arkansas is above that now. It's above that by at least 2,000, above a 10,000. So I got halfway through it. I didn't want to come out and say that. I'm saying it now. I wanted to wait a little bit. So I withdrew my tweet in response to that. I was going to brag for Arkansas. But Carter Knox is a guy that Arkansas can up the ante to keep. and say, look, you don't need a second round guarantee. We're going to pay you in 1 year, which you might have made, maybe a little bit more over 2 years, the first 2 years of a guarantee. And now it's back in the players' court. Well, do I want to get closer to a second contract in the NBA? The NBA game's different. I can focus on that. I don't have to worry about school. But I have a feeling if the feedback's good enough and Calipari's going to tell him, he's going to advise him, yeah, stay in. But I just got a feeling that this is going to work out where he comes back. Right now, that's my take on it. I may change based on as feedback comes in and I'll learn about it. Because I can promise you some of my NBA contacts are going to keep me informed on this process as they can. But the feedback, all the teams now that he's in the draft are going to give, their take on what his draftability is, and then they'll have a graph that shows the different tiers of where teams thought it would be and give percentages on, mid first round, late first round, early second round. So all that's going to be there for him. And then there's precedents on what other guys have been able to do with that to get the kind of deals they want. Obviously a two-way situation is not going to be lucrative, be attractive for someone like Carter Knox. And look, I mentioned the all-league thing, but if he shows the kind of improvement that gets him that, because he's still young, it wouldn't hurt him to come back another year necessarily, because they say the longer you stay in college, the more they'll pick your game apart. But if you bet on yourself and say, I'm going to make sure I'm a potential mid first round, but at least a first rounder by coming back, you're going to get a nice NIL and it's going to be worth your while. So let's wrap that up now and say that we think Carter Knox probably comes back, but we got to go through this process and we know it can take a while. Now, at the end of the retention video, jumping back to that, John Calipari said something, I'm paraphrasing here, but we're not done yet. So he likes the roster. He likes the way this team's coming together. He said that, big smile on his face, but we're not done yet. Well, we know that. We've been talking about it. And we've been talking about, do you have the kind of guys in retention and what you've done, with your high school class and these two big men? Do you have enough there to feel like you've got needle movers in terms of enough alpha, enough, kind of go-to primary type guys in there? I wouldn't say looking at Trevor in Brazil other than he can be productive if he does it consistently. He's not a guy that I necessarily would say, okay, you're going to run stuff through him. He's a guy that can take a game over. Carter Knox, I'm not quite there yet. I'm not so sure Darius Acuff Jr. won't be one of those guys, kind of like Jeremiah Fears was consistently, Trey Johnson was at times, and even Boogie Fland. If you remember, Arkansas's best wins before he got hurt, because they started 0-5 in SEC play, and it was a crap show for everybody at that point. But Arkansas's best 2 wins in non-conference was a road win over a crummy Miami team. It was the team's first true road game, and they had decent enough players to make, to stay competitive. He had a big finish in that game to carry Arkansas over the finish line and, upend a small deficit into a big enough lead to finish out with a 3-point win. Then the next game with the team with any kind of pulse was against Michigan in New York. Then he went off for 20 points in his homecoming. So you had their 2 best wins. He was that guy. No reason to think Darius Acuff Jr. can't be that more consistently, especially in year 2, where he's going to have solid pieces around him, guys that have been in the program, guys that know what it feels like to be successful. Even though you lost 14 games and it took a while to get there, they can build on that, and he can benefit from some of that. He can benefit from some of the things they bring to the table. So maybe he's an all-league kind of guy. So you can't rule it out. I mean, Malik Ewan, he's a talented offensive player. 14 points per game in just 26 minutes. I don't know if his minutes increase or not. You've got Pringle in there. You'll have Brazil playing some at the 5. But he's a guy that, in theory could, based on what you have around him, could be kind of a go-to frontline guy. He's certainly more productive offensively than guys like that you had that are now gone, in Jonas Adu and Big Z. Even when you looked at Jonas Adu's best season at Tennessee, he wasn't scoring in the same kind of volume. Their rebounds are similar. So you have to take a hard look at that. How much of the apple cart will we upset if we bring in somebody that's going to factor in big? But I don't know that you can do that with it, and feel good about moving the needle with your program and saying, okay, we're talking about a Final Four and getting that far, but do we really have the pieces and what we know about now and again, I think Carter Knox comes back, but even counting him, I think, getting a splash guy could make sense. And we went through it again yesterday in my afternoon, and we talked about, different groups. I was doing it Cal's arc, right? Because of the two big men splash on the same day, looking at two. And I said, there are two splash guys. At that time, we were talking Jameer Watkins and Darian Williams. Well, Jameer Watkins is one of those guys. And about two or three here at the top of what I'd call a big board, the way I see it, 6'7", played with you at Florida State, has familiarity with Arkansas. He committed to EPM. Eric Patrick Musselman went on campus 2 portal seasons ago, and then, or I guess it was 3 actually, and then backed out. Was it 2 or 3? Same time as Khalif Battle. So it was 2 portal seasons ago. They both committed, and then Watkins left, got off campus, and then it wasn't shortly after that he decommitted. And Cal was, EPM was, beside himself over that situation. But that's how it, Arkansas ends up with Jeremiah Davenport, and he'd been in the wings, kind of waiting to hear back from the staff. Is it a go? And I remember being asked what I thought about that. I'm like, hey, go for it. Why not? You run out of options. I was actually asked my opinion on was that something to do, and I went through what I viewed as the cons on that, but it seemed like that's the direction they wanted to go. So I'm like, okay, then go for it. Why'd you ask me? It was kind of one of those things, actually. Nolan did it with 12, right? But see, Calipari told us, are we targeting Darian Williams? I think that's the kind of guy that everybody, if they have a spot open and they don't get to where they, if they're willing to do that because they like what they have and they think they can make it work, if they have to wait around. Because Jameer Watkins is in the draft process. Darian Williams is. Now Carter Knox is. You may have to wait around on more than your own here if you do want to land one of those guys. But Jameer Watkins at 6'7", 215, 18.4 points. We've gone through all this already. But he's 5.7 rebounds, so similar rebounding wise to Adu Thero, 2.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 43% shooter from the field. He did take 5.2 3-point shots per game. That's good volume for a scorer like that, because he's not just restricted to playing inside the arc. Now, he was just under 33% shooting from 3, but that's not an awful percentage at that volume. And maybe, he career-wise, there's, not a lot there that tells you he's going to up that a whole lot, but maybe he could improve on it. And shoots about 75% at the free throw line and gets there quite a bit. He gets the free throw line quite a bit. So Jameer Watkins would make sense as a guy that could help you at the 3, maybe even play some 2, be a 3-4 combo and be on the court at the same time as Trevor Brazile when he's getting his 5-spot minutes. Or when Trevin's at the 4, be your 3 when Carter Knox is maybe helping at the 2 or he's out of the game. There's a way to move the pieces around, but at some point, the spoils of riches on some of these guys that Arkansas might really have a shot at, you're not going to be able to get all of them, because you got within your retention and these big name guys you brought in your sign class and those 2 other big men. At some point you might also be looking at adding just a depth piece, maybe one splash guy and then 1 or 2 depth pieces somewhere, kind of background guys that we've talked about. Some of those names, I'll hit on some of them again. But Jameer Watkins, we've been talking about, so I want to throw his name in there again. To me, he's the kind of guy that's tied for first on your big board, if you want to call it a tie, because I can make the case for some other guys as being number 1 on your big board. This is going to send a lot of Razorback fans maybe into, protest when I say Chad Baker Mazara's name. But he went in the portal today, and it's just been a little bit rubby out there that there might be something there with Arkansas. He's one of those guys. Jameer Watkins, maybe that too. But Chad Baker Mazara didn't take long for some of that to start to spark up a little bit. Here's a guy that's a lightning rod for controversy. He runs his mouth. He's a trash talker. He gets technical fouls. He's a clutch kind of player most of the time. He's hit some big shots in big moments. And then he has stuff where he hurts you too, because, he just can't stay between the lines and focus on doing what it takes to make winning plays because of some of the antics. So there's some of that you have to deal with. But man, he checks a lot of boxes in terms of need and the kind of things that Calipari has shown us matter to him when he's in the portal. Baker Mazara is a 4-year guy, started out at Duquesne, was at San Diego State, and then the last 2 years at Auburn. Career high this year, 13.2 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.2 steals. But when you look at all 4 years and you combine it all together, he's not the most volume guy shooter from three. 144 made threes in a career, 4 years. All right, we know players that made over 100 this year, and they're snipers. But through his career, this guy has been consistently efficient from three. He's at just under 40% for all 4 years. And so you look at something like that and you go, hey, I know what I'm getting there. I know what the quality and the commodity is. 39.8% from distance. On again, 144 made threes, spanning all 4 years of college. But he's getting out of Auburn, I guess. Maybe there's a path to go back. I don't know. But I'm hearing just a little bit of spark maybe that Arkansas could be in play for him. I've already started updating my written big board and what I've got posted to HogvilleNET. I haven't updated in a while because I've been waiting on some stuff like today. I've been working on that. And I mentioned earlier today, working on it as I've gotten it ready, that keep an eye on it. Look, Calipari covets players just like Nelly Davis that got to a Final Four. Chad Baker-Mazara helped Auburn, big part of that. We know that. Second leading scorer on the team behind Janai Broome, helped him to a Final Four. Big play guy, big shot maker. He had a big shot driving baseline against Arkansas when the Hogs took a 1-point lead on a Nelly Davis drive with 3 minutes to go or just under it. Next possession, late shot clock. Looks like Auburn might be bottled up. He drove tough baseline drive, off balance finish off the glass, put him back in the lead. But he's a guy that's got that Final Four experience. He's got the SEC experience the last 2 years. We know Calipari likes that, especially in the big men. When you looked at Jonas Adu and Nick Pringle. So he checks boxes here. And, the other stuff is the other stuff. But if he's on your team, as long as it doesn't disrupt everybody else, Auburn seemed to do okay with it. I couldn't swear that would work here. Calipari seems to do a really good job of keeping his guys in line. I think Chad Baker-Mazara also had a taunting technical foul in that Arkansas game. He's had a bunch of those, man. He's like, the NBA front office would get rich donating his money to charity for his technical fouls at the NBA level. But anyway, that's Chad Baker-Mazara. So keep an eye on that one. Just keep an eye on it. And the other thing is, I mentioned you need 3-point shooting. That's one of the things that even though you've added some physicality to the front line, you check that box. It looks like, because Calipari says we're not done yet, and right now, when you count up the numbers, you're at 9, and with Carter Knox, that gets you to 10. And so you've already exceeded your 9 last year, especially if Seeley and Artal are a little bit more of usable guys than the other guys that were simply not. And you're still adding pieces. And so a guy like him helps you answer a need. A 6'7" wing could probably be on the floor with another wing and 2 other guards in a small ball setting. But he also can help you with that 3-point shooting. And it's a need. The physicality, the depth on the front line, it looks like those things are getting addressed. But 3-point shooting, that's with everything that we're seeing with retention, the high school guys, because it's still unproven. Will it translate? I keep saying it. Malik Thomas, 8.4 threes per game at overtime elite, over 38%. That's great. Will that translate? A-Cup is very streaky. You'd love to see him get to 35% as a freshman, if that could happen. Do I think Cal would go after Darian Williams? Maybe. I mean, we're talking about Jameer Watkins. He would be a guy that could be a 3-4 for you. He can shoot and handle and pass, play facing. So there's the wing element, and then he can bully ball your butt like a Thuro, similar, and get you and have his way around the basket. Thuro is more explosive. This guy's got actual craft to change directions if you wall him off, but he's also a bully ball element, not as much of the above the rim, quick above the rim like Thuro, but there's some comparisons there. But this guy's a better overall player when you get the skill level, the ability to shoot 3, all that stuff. He can draw fouls and get to the line. He can rack up some assists because he makes good plays off the way you try to defend and stop him. Yeah, so I could see any team going after him. But anyway, Jameer Watkins, Chad Baker-Mazara, another player, and I mentioned this way back on one of these segments when there was talk that he might go into the portal when portal season was coming around, was P.J. Haggerty out of Memphis. I just brought his name up. 6'3" guard, started out at he's a Crosby, Texas native, started out at TCU, transferred to Tulsa this past season at Memphis, a second-team All-American, 21.7 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.8 steals. Now, he did have 3.3 turnovers per game, but look, he's a high usage guy when he's on the court. You're just, it seems like everything's kind of flowing through him. And there was a bit of an injury issue with the lead guard for a couple of games in postseason. And he actually had to show at the one some and did a good job there. But man, his numbers are incredible. 47.6% from the field. And this past season, this is not a volume three-point shooting guy, but efficient. 39 of 107 from three, so he made basically 1 3 per game. Doesn't take a ton, 36.4%. You'll take that. That's a good percentage. So he'd help you there a little bit if it translates, and why wouldn't it at this point? But man, 81.8% from the free throw line, and he shot nearly 8 free throws per game. So that's part of what he does. And the only way you're doing that is not by taking a bunch of threes. It's by getting into your drive game, getting downhill and getting to the basket. And so Haggerty's a guy that makes a lot of sense for the way Arkansas plays and the way Calipari likes. He likes that dribble drive stuff and guys getting downhill. And three-point shooting has always been kind of secondary off of that stuff. There should be maybe more of a priority made out of it, but at least this guy, if you took him. So now with DJ coming back, how would that work? Look, there's mutual stuff going on here. There was back before he got in the portal. And I kept checking on him and have not talked about him because the closer we got to getting to the part where the portal closed, I didn't have the strongest feeling that he was still going to get in. I kept thinking, well, it was supposed to happen earlier. Maybe something's been worked out. And I would check on it. Nothing new to tell me, so I just haven't talked about him. But he's in the portal now, and I got wind of this. I put a tweet out 2 minutes before it became official and it was announced. Because stuff was just starting to roll off the assembly line. Chad Baker Mazzara. And then Haggerty and some others. But that was big time. And so just to give you an example, he started all 35 games this year, 36.7 minutes per game. But Haggerty, just to give you an example, in an 83-80 win over Wichita State, I kept talking about how I watched 2 of those 3 games, including the American Athletic Conference quarterfinals. Well, in that game that I watched, 42 points. That was on March 14th. 42 points in a Memphis win by 3. 16 of 25 from the field, 10 of 11 from the free throw line. He didn't make a three-pointer. He only took 2. He didn't make one. 42 points without making threes. These are, when you really look at John Calipari and wanting volume guys, this is the kind of guy that's continues to do stuff that he likes. 9 rebounds per game, 9 rebounds in that 42-point game, 4 assists, 3 steals, and he did have 5 turnovers. But again, when you're running so much through him, so there's an argument to be made. Well, how much is too much, and where's that balance of getting more role type players to give you depth, and where do you convolute things in your high production guys? Because you're thinking Darius Haycup's going to be a guy like that. You're thinking Carter Knox could maybe get up to be a 14 to 15 kind of points per game. You're thinking, again, that Malik Ewan can be a 15 points per game scorer, somewhere in that range. Trevor Brazile maybe do what he did the last 9 games, 11 points, 9 rebounds per game. So no, not a volume scorer, but how many double-figure scores are you really going to have? And a guy you bring in that's scoring 22%, and he knows he's wired to score. Same with Jameer Watkins. You have to take those into consideration. I think the deal with Jameer Watkins and even a Chad Baker Mazzara is on some level those guys make sense because you don't have a ton of depth where they could plug in as a second wing, and so they're kind of your small ball 4 for a little while. There's more opportunities for them to plug in and play and get their minutes, whereas a backcourt player like Haggerty, who's basically a 2, can help at the 1. Maybe he could be on the court with 2 other guards as a 3. I don't know. But you're logjam there. You got depth at the 3 with Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. And between Malik Thomas, Darius Haycup Jr., and DJ Wagner, you're pretty much blocked up 1 through 2, except you did lose Nelly Davis. And this would be a kind of guy that's that volume producer And even though he's not a high volume 3-point taker, he's got a good percentage there. And so in theory, he doesn't hurt you there if you can figure out a way to make that work. You know, so those are some options there. But there's been mutual interest with PJ Haggerty. There's a feeling that Arkansas could, should, or will be involved there. Chad Baker Mazar, a similar situation right now. There'll be other teams. You're going to hear other stuff. Illinois for some of these guys is one of the schools out there that might, Peja Stojakovic, former NBA player back in the 90s and 2000s, teammates in the Sacramento Kings with the great Corliss Williamson, Razorback royalty, Hogs icon, Final Four most outstanding player, NCAA champion at Arkansas, sixth man of the year in the NBA, but those guys were teammates. Well, it's his son. And so when his son was being recruited, he was on the Adidas circuit, and I saw him play in person multiple times. Andrei Stojakovic, a 6'7" wing. The Hogs actually played him. Calipari recruited him heavily. I remember seeing Calipari out to watch his games on the Adidas circuit, and it was other Kentucky assistants. They would come in big numbers sometimes to watch him or to have coverage in case they were looking at another player, and they could split the staff up and make sure someone was always at his games. I need a nugget, Kevin. Well, I don't know how many nuggets we have. I just gave them to you. 2 big portal splashes today, and that Arkansas is connected. There's some connectivity there with some real opportunity to become something. I can't tell you that it will for sure, but it's one of the reasons this morning I said, pay attention to more guys going in the portal. That can impact who they might still be bringing in, and guys have been talking about bringing in. I knew that something was coming. I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to fall. And all on the same day, pretty much, not fully, but pretty much. And so there it is. So guys like Haggerty and Baker Mazar, keep an eye on that. Again, Jameer Watkins, I've been saying for a while, that would be one that makes sense. Keep an eye on that. But Stojakovic, 6'7", Calipari really prioritized him at Kentucky. He ended up going to Stanford, staying out on the West Coast. And Arkansas played against him in the Bahamas. That overtime win. He had a good game in that game. It made some big plays, and the game went to overtime or 2 overtimes, whatever it was. Arkansas was its only win out there against a crummy Stanford team. Well, he transferred to California. Both of those teams, Stanford and California, ironically, no longer Pac-12. Obviously, they're both in the ACC, Atlantic Coast teams out of California. So he stayed in the ACC, I guess if you want to look at it that way, or, back in that conference at Cal this year. At 17.9 points, 4.7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.2 blocks at 6'7". So he'll defend a little bit, mano a mano. 42% from the field, only 32.2% shooting from 3. Now his dad, that lineage, that family DNA is about 3-point shooting. That's his dad was a great, even back then when it wasn't as prevalent in the game as it is now, he was known as a shooter and a guy that could knock down some threes. So 32.2% in his career in 2 years, 75 of 233. So that averages out to about 1 make per game. He's played in 61 college games, and he's a 76.6% free throw shooter. So you're saying, well, what would be the draw there? Well, first, I think the hope would be maybe he can improve by year 3 and raise the bar a little bit from 3-point shooting. But the other thing is, now I don't have any information that Arkansas, there's something brewing here other than just remembering how much Calipari pursued him and was on him. That doesn't mean that would happen again. I would think some of these other guys that we've already talked about would be a priority over him anyway. So another guy that entered the portal today, Arizona State, B.J. Freeman, the guy that didn't quite finish out the season there. Something was going on over there. He might have been dismissed from the team. I've heard different things. 6'6" wing, 200 pounds, 13.7 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, 2.6 assists. He made 35.6% from 3 this year, and 75% free throw shooter. So it's just another guy that out there that's a proven college player and has been putting up, good numbers, and the percentages are fine, and he's in the portal now. So I don't know if he would be another guy you'd look at that for help at that 6'7" spot or excuse me, that 3-4 spot for a guy that's 6'6", maybe 6'7" in height. Some of the other names we've been talking about as depth pieces, when you start looking at that wing spot, maybe a Kamani Hamilton, who Arkansas recently reached out to at a high point. That's another option if you don't close on one of these bigger names at that 3-4 tweener thing, or if you just determine, no, we're going to get Carter back. We've done, we've got another way to do something, so we're just going to go, just depth and not, mainstay, go to, starter value kind of guy. So just reminder. Same on the front line. I mentioned Onyenso. I was told to keep an eye on Ugonna Onyenso. He spent 2 seasons with Cal. Rim protector, doesn't play a whole lot. Didn't under Cal. Played even less at Kansas State this year. Went in the portal. We're still keeping an eye on it. He would be a third guy on that center spot. So let's say you do that along with Ewan and Pringle, and you've got Brazil, who we know staying now as your 4-5, and you added Onyenso. Well, you got 4 legitimate big men. We can still talk 3-4 tweeners and how they can help you with the small ball part of it. But now you could even have a look in games where you're playing heavy minutes with 4 bigs. Who did that and won a national championship there this year? The Florida Gators. Now their system and the way they do things are different. These bigs aren't like those bigs, but it gives you the idea of, hey, maybe it's a good idea to have 4, not 3. Make sure we're there and protected with attrition, that we have some versatility, that we have a rim protector, that we have the physical guy, that we can play in more than one way, where you were kind of limited last year, especially with Jonas Adu being hurt for so long, and even Brazil not, and that's the other thing with Brazil, whether you agree or not that he should be getting heavy minutes. I've said if you felt like as a staff that he can maintain what he was doing those last 9 games, then yeah, he's probably your feature guy there, and you recruit backup depth. But if you're not sure about that, and or you feel good about it but not sure about it, or great, and you feel like, hey, I'm going to cover all bases here, I'm going to get a Jameer Watkins, and I'll make sure those guys are both getting their minutes. And we have some other ways we can do things if TB's not quite there. Now, Thero wasn't the same kind of 3-4 combo that Watkins is. There are similarities, but the point is, when Thero was in a main focal point kind of a role, a starter role, he was the starter. Brazil didn't respond well to that. He needed the opportunity to expand what he could be for the first time consistently in his career. So then the question becomes, well, is that okay? Are you okay with that? I say maybe. If the staff thinks we'll just make sure he gets those minutes and he has that role and we feel good that he's going to do it, I can live with that. If they decide to go another direction and add depth behind him, I could roll with that. Or if they decide we're not sure about it, let's add a Jameer Watkins somewhere else, something else there to give us another look, and maybe he'll end up playing more minutes at 4, and Brazil's just going to have to deal with it. And again, maybe they have a pathway to convince everybody you're going to get your minutes. Doesn't matter who's starting, and maybe Brazil's okay as long as he's getting his minutes and getting the kind of minutes where he can produce like he did, maybe coming off the bench. I mean, there's more than one way to do it. And that goes with Haggerty. I think it's just a little bit more difficult to see the pathway for a true backcourt piece. Although, I keep saying this, Arkansas needs shooters, whether they're a huge role piece or depth, and someone that's going to factor in, Chad Baker-Mazara, going back to his numbers. We talked about guys like Adam Miller, who had 43% last year, shooting 43%. Speaking of Arizona State, and Arkansas has recently contacted him. Wouldn't have to have a big role. Could maybe complement and be that floor spacer that you need, and a guy that can help you with your 3-point shooting. There's more than one way to do it. And so these are some things that we're repeating now. This was a really big news day. I'm getting close to an hour. There was a lot more to talk about today. The retention, Carter Knox testing the draft waters and leave it open the return possibilities. I haven't smiled a whole lot tonight because I'm just downright fatigued from this long day. We're going on 15 hours since I was on this morning, but there is a lot to smile about. I thought the video retention announcement was really good. I like the way Cal did it. I like the little pop-up pictures. I like the players, addressing the situation. We understand Carter Knox couldn't be part of that because right now, he's an NBA guy. I know it's a weird thing to say when we're saying in one breath we think he'll come back, but technically, once you're entered in that draft, you're not a scholarship player, and you're not even eligible to. You're not a student in a sense until you formally withdraw. So the announcement came out because he already done the paperwork. Has it already happened? I don't know for sure on that timing wise, but in terms of optics with your retention video, you just couldn't include him because that would confuse people, right? You can't do it right now because technically once that paperwork's done, until he's out and has officially gotten out by the deadline, he's no longer a college player. Remember Devo Davis? We used to say that the whole time. Devo went through the draft process, and he even got a last minute workout with the Milwaukee Bucks right before the draft deadline. And I kept saying he's coming back. He's going to get this workout. Everybody relax. I've already sourced it. The plan is he's coming back, but he's going to make the most of the opportunity. But you're never comfortable until it becomes official. But he's not a college player until he withdraws. So for that period of time while he was in there, he was no longer a college player. All right, we are 56 minutes in. Is everybody excited about this news? Are you happy that DJ's back? Are you happy that Trevor's back? Are you happy about Billy Richmond III? Are you proud of how much NIL is left? I've heard anywhere now. See, so there was a handsome amount out there for Nate Ament, and it's looking more and more like it's not going to be Arkansas. So with him, it was going to push out greater than. Let me do my math in my head. So Arkansas is probably close to 9 million in what it's doing here right now, with a shot at getting beyond 12 million. So I'll say it that way. So how are you going to do that? What has freed up for you now? Now that it looks like Ament's off the table quite a bit. And so, have they already gotten Carter Knox taken care of? Said, here's what we're doing for you. We know you're going to test the waters. We encourage you to do that. But if you come back, they've already got it worked out. Or, is that something they're going to get down the road on and see what happens with the draft part of it before they determine where they need to be on that? That I don't know for certain. Now, when we were talking about guys like Haggerty and some of these other names, you're going, well, what happened with Lamar Wilkerson? What happened with Jerron Pierre Jr.? What happened with, Keyshawn Hall? Well, part of that's you're waiting out for Nate Ament and that money, but also you're figuring out and sorting out what you're doing in the backcourt. And we always speculated, well, if it's looking more and more like DJ's coming back, maybe you peeled off of those guys. The other thought of that is maybe because you were waiting for PJ Haggerty to go in the portal and you still got something in the works there. Again, the thought was, even a while back when early in portal season, there'd be something there if he would just do it. There's reason to think there could be something moving towards Arkansas if he does it. And you're hearing the same thing now with Chad Baker-Mazar in there, something similar. So I can't go into those details other than it's been on my mind for a while on some things. And again, Jameer Watkins is in that fold as well. You could say, those guys sound great. I'm in on Jameer Watkins. Maybe there's something could still happen there. Because if you're being told, there's another A-list kind of guy that Arkansas is trying to add. We talked about it yesterday. That proof of concept because Ament, they hadn't given up on Ament. So you knew they're good with that. Just how much did that impact decisions on other guys they passed on or didn't go deep enough with that we all thought they should? And now that it's trending toward maybe they know, or maybe they're figuring it out now, he's not in the mix. That tells you that it's one of these things probably, maybe, until something changes on that and some other school, things liven up there. Those things happen. We've seen it play out so much. I'm just saying keep it on it. I'm not trying to telegraph Arkansas for sure is going to bring in one of those top 3 names I mentioned, but they just might. Tennessee came strong with its offer. I told you that Arkansas was really good and that they had wiggle room with it. So I'm still trying to find out, did Arkansas exercise the wiggle room to stay in it, or do they stand put and Tennessee did enough to get them over the finish line? Part of this is opportunity along with the money. and the vision for how they're going to use you and who else have you brought in. And, Arkansas certainly didn't bring anything in that would necessarily threaten Ament unless he's worried about, how would he be able to stay on the floor as a 4 at times playing with other wings who have proven they can get things done, like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. Not that he's not projected to go draft higher than them, but maybe they check some boxes he won't physically for a while. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, we could look at Tennessee's additions and things and make the same comparisons maybe. I don't think it was just one thing, but I think the NIL was the biggest part of it. I do. I think for most of these it is. And then if you get to a point where NIL is fairly even and equal, then what else? What are the other dynamics that push the needle toward one school over the others? And so, right now, if I was going to call a starting lineup based on who we know and thinking, and then also because I've said I think Carter Knox coming back, I'm going to say right now this would be my starting 5. And part of this is also based on how I know Calipari operates as well, or how I believe he will continue to operate going into year 2 at Arkansas. And so I would say Darius Acuff at the 1, DJ Wagner as a 2, starting at your 2, Carter Knox at the 3. For now, Trevor Brazil as the starter at the 4, and Malik Ewan at the 5. Now, Calipari showed substitution patterns because they were so low on numbers early. As soon as even before the first TV timeout. So before it got under the under 16 minute, he was already starting to rotate guys in. Well, he kind of had to do that to keep guys fresh. We're dealing with just 7. You're just shuffling the deck around. He's going to make this a bigger roster. So I don't know that we'll see guys come in that soon. But DJ is going to get his time at the 1. So even if he starts games at the 2, depending upon how quickly they give Acuff a rest or decide to do something a little differently, you could see DJ just stay on the court maybe in some scenarios and just slide over to the 1. And then Malik Thomas is maybe checking in. Maybe he's coming in for Acuff. DJ goes to the 1, Malik Thomas to the 2. I'm not using some of these grandiose portal names right now because I don't want to sound like I'm projecting one over the other right now to Arkansas. Let's just work with what we have and talk about how maybe you illustrate how some of this flexibility could work. Maybe Carter Knox can play some of the 2. Will we see Billy Richmond III again helping at the lead guard? I kind of hope not. But I'll tell you this, because I think you're going to have depth there. As long as guys are healthy, I hope not. But I will say this. I like him in kind of a Scottie Pippen, get the defensive rebound. He is a blazer end to end. Let him get out in transition and pick and choose. If he can get all the way to the rim and smash it, that's the bet. That's option A. But he does have a little bit of a knack of making good passes. He is turnover prone as well. And then maybe let him continue to develop and give him some shots at times based on matchups, or maybe he's got, whatever on the ball, kind of running stuff through him a little bit. I don't think we'll see a lot of it, but I don't know that it completely dies and goes away. I just kind of illustrated some stuff that maybe you see there. I'm not convinced that Ewan and Pringle can't play a few minutes together on the court without it being awful, because Ewan, even though he doesn't shoot from 3, can face up and do some things offensively, working his way to the basket. And one other big out there is not necessarily a disaster. Someone who can maybe position for an offensive rebound or set a pick, or you see all the time sort of your enforcers sealing off players in the paint so that they can't recover and help on a guy that's driving in and bring that secondary help. And Ewan's the kind of guy that can beat other bigs using his bounce and get into nice finishing angles. This guy's also athletic. I don't know, but going back, not just watching his highlights, but the games I watched, that dude had some nice dunks, and it seemed like he had a lot. I don't know what he ended up with, but it wouldn't shock me if he had somewhere between 1.5 and 2 dunks per game on the season, something like that. Seemed like it. I don't know, but that's kind of what I recall. And then Pringle's just in there, Kamani Johnson, but a little bigger and a little better. Not a rim protector, but and both of them are really strong rebounders, and Ewan on the offensive line. You got all kinds of stuff to work with here. And then Brazil, I think that because the question mark is so big, can you feel certain that he's going to be what he was those last 9 games? Opens the door for some of that extra stuff in that 3-4 combo look, and then doing that, but also acknowledging, hey, we're probably still going to need to expand his role versus what it was for so long playing in Adu Thero's shadow. And maybe Brazil would have earned more minutes by being able to produce and make the most of the minutes he was getting. He just wasn't able to do it. But he flourished when it was just the keys were handed to him for that spot. So you got to work through all of that as you complete this. Calipari says we're not done yet. If he completely goes with 2 or 3 more depth pieces, fine. I think he probably needs one more difference maker. And we kind of identified some of the players that could do that and how that would look. And I certainly think 3-point shooting needs to be addressed. So even if 2 of the 3 aren't difference makers, maybe they can help you percentage-wise and quality shooting from 3, and it's been proven because they're veteran guys out of the portal. Somehow I think you need to continue to try to address that. We'll see what happens. All right, an hour and 5 minutes in, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Big news day. No, not another portal edition, but people going into the portal, some tied to Arkansas, have been for a while, and now, that stuff's starting to stir up again, and they're actually in the portal here late with just a few days to go before it closes. But all the retention news, the Carter Knox, keep an eye on that. That's one that you can't feel 100% about until you do, until it's announced, till he's out. Thank you, Kevin. Great insight. Houston had it. Thank you. LJ Cryer was the only threat from 3 on Houston. Yeah, that's not true. They had other guys. They had 2 or 3 other guys that were threats from 3. That's not fully true. Now, he may have been the most consistent. I have to go back and look at it. But they also play a certain way where they just hammer the offensive glass. Their system's set up for it. And they just wear you down defensively and getting on that glass. And so there is more than one way to skin a cat. But I think Arkansas has to get better from 3. Thank you, Kevin. Hughes and Sharp can shoot. Yeah, those 2. Malik Wilson, who I covered in high school, he's from Louisiana, played grassroots with the Woods Elite Little Rock-based team before they went defunct. Back in 2019, he was a class of 19. He's still in college. Oh my, the hardships and the COVID year and the free nilly Wild West, but he was one of their key rotation pieces off the bench, and he could shoot a little bit. I don't know what he ended up percentage-wise from 3 on the season, but that was part of his wheelhouse, was shooting some threes as well. So anyway, I always say I'm getting off here, and then I keep reading the comments because they're so good. Those faded off. Let's see if we can grab them real quick. Almost an hour and 10 minutes in. Shame on me. You live in Texas. It's one of Samson's best 3-point shooting teams. He had it. Yeah, it was. It was. Now, LJ Cryer was kind of the guy, right? And so that part of it was true, but just not that he was the only shooter. I saw that, and I was thinking, well, typically they beat you in other ways, but that team did actually have 3-point shooters, and we went through that a little bit. But again, thank you for joining me here. We're always on Newswatch. If something else breaks, I doubt it gets much louder tonight than it's already been, but who the hell knows? I'll be back on sometime tomorrow to go through stuff. I'm going to try to dig and find out more if I can on guys like Haggerty and Baker Mazzara and Jameer Watkins and some of these other names, Stojakovic, maybe BJ Freeman, just some of these names. Try to find out more about it in Yinso, and because I'm keeping an eye on it, right? I was told to keep an eye on it. Well, where is he? Where is he? Let's keep our eye on it. But until next time, thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. Probably see you tomorrow.